Hello, everyone. So, thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Alexey, and I am an intern here at the Grolier this summer, and I am giving introductions today. So Susan Barbara was planning on giving the introductions tonight, but sadly she fell ill, and so she was not able to join us tonight. So let's wish her a speed recovery. Tonight, Jessica Cuello, Devin Johnston, and and Adam Scheffler are reading. So the first reader tonight is going to be Jessica Cuello, and a little bit about Jessica. Her most recent book is Yours Creature. It was published by JackLeg Press in 2022. Her book Liar, selected by Dorianne Laux for the 2020 Barrow Street Book Prize, was honored with the Eugene Nassar Prize, the CNY Book Award, and a finalist nod for the Housatonic Book Award. Cuello is also the author of Hunt, published by the Word Works in 2017, and Pricking, published in Tiger Bark Press in 2016. Cuello has been awarded the 2022 Nina Riggs Poetry Prize, 2 CNY Book Awards, the 2016 Washington Prize, the New Letters Poetry Prize, a Saltonstall Fellowship, and the New Ohio Review Poetry Prize. She's a poetry editor at Tahoma Literary Review and teaches French in Central New NY. So the second reader is Devin Johnston, and Devin was born in 1970 and spent his childhood in North Carolina. He's the author of 7 books of poetry, including Dragons, published by Farrar, Strauss, and Giroux in 2023. He has also published Creaturely and other essays, Meditations on the Natural World. He works as an editor of Flood Editions, a non-profit publishing house, and he teaches at St. Louis University in Missouri. And then we have our last but not least reader, Adam Scheffler. Adam Scheffler grew up in California, received his MFA in poetry from the Iowa Writers Workshop, and his PhD in English from Harvard. His first book of poems, A Dog's Life, won the 2016 JackLeg Press book contest, and his second poetry book, Heartworm, won the 2021 Moon City Press book contest. His poems have appeared in the American Poetry Review, Narrative, the Yale Review, Verse Daily, the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, and many other venues. He's currently working on a book of literary criticism about the poet James Wright, and he teaches in the Harvard College Writing Program. So one last thing that I will ask you to do is please silence your cell phones, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you so much, James, for having me here. This is a real treat to read in this beautiful bookstore. I'm going to read one poem from my book Liar at the end that came out in 21. And I'm going to read mostly from my new book, came out this May. It's called Yours Creature. It is a series of epistolary poems in the voice of Mary Shelley. And most of the letters are addressed to her mother, the feminist and activist Mary Wollstonecraft. Some of the poems are addressed to her creature from Frankenstein, and some are addressed to Years. And they're kind of chronological. I'm going to begin with the opening poem in the book, which begins with her birth. And her mother, Wollstonecraft, died. You may know this little detail, died 11 days after her birth from an infection. Dear Mother, I wanted to crawl back into the black interior of you, womb scratched by an animal, but they wouldn't let me. I hung apart like gallows men dangling for sweet touch. A line from the red radius of your womb went dark. That night, the whole of London raised its eyes to watch the comet pass, except for us. Instead, my currish cry and snarl, my cuss, my cut and run, my cutting tooth, made death a custom house. Your daughter, Mary Shelley. Dear mother, I am threatened with a return of my girlish troubles, my arm covered red with scabs, my hand a floor at the abattoir. At night, the animal cry is the clock strike hour of sour milk. At noon, the swinging pig is ankles tied. In the 3 stories of the Skinner house, my stepmother is not you. Her latch on me is fixed, and I learn to regard myself with her repulsion fixed to the mold in her domestic eye. My skin is a revolt. How can it not cry animal when she pulls my hair and knocks me down with longing for your presence, Mary Shelley? This one has a couple initials. Percy Shelley is referred to by P, not in this poem, but later. And the G in this poem is her father, Godwin, who was a writer and scholar. And that's why Percy Shelley showed up at their house when she was a girl. Dear mother, I watch G's fingers on the page, neck with a faint line, neck you loved, so I love it too. He is the glaze through which I see the sun. We call the goat's beard in our field, sweet meadow, go to bed at noon, and wise father men. I touch the feathered heads to feel the god of it. At Chalk Farm, we drink the cream of syllabubs. Sister holds my arm, but I am the apple of his eye. I am the reader of his work. His frown can collapse my spine. His grief for you becomes a pillar my attention winds onto. Are you mad that I took your... G is mad with his glacial love and becomes more so despite my maniacal reading toward love. A child can kill its mother, baby wet and monstrous, slipping with eyes opened, black and white, the stewed creation, not asking to be born, but requiring M. This one has a quote from Coleridge at the beginning. The cadaverous silence of Godwin's children is quite catacombs. Dear mother, silence was my pride, my object stillness, the quiet prize. My brain was a carnation on a stem, made my God of a father look at me, quiet petals and silver pages. I meant to read until I was his perfect daughter, but P put one hand beneath my smock and all the untouched years responded. Godwin had nothing to hold me with. I didn't know he'd snap me like a stem and toss me on a pile of exile. He was my God, first partner, the sun to my green tissue. He sent me letters with formal closings, as though I was still plicate in my room, leaf ribs pointed toward him, plumule hidden from all but him. Mother, you didn't raise me. Mary Shelley. This one has a line from one of her letters. Dear mother, I had a dream that my little baby came to life again. What is it to make a life that dies like God? It cannot stand to stay. Cabbage leaves are soft like cloth and smell of tea. I wore them on my breast like medicine. The earthy taste of tea made me hate my flesh. I didn't know if I was made of anything else. Her 13 days were the only time, and they had no measure. Clouds swirled like bands of twisted cloth. I'm sorry to burden you. As a child, I was spooked by the empty hall when father moved us in. At first, he loved me like I was you. And in the dream, we rubbed it by the fire and it lived. Yours as ever, Mary. This one references the famous summer where she wrote Frankenstein in the mountains of Switzerland was called The Year Without a Summer because of the volcanic explosion that filled the skies with ash. Dear Mother, I was aware of you the year without a summer. The sunlight reddened. My hands too were weather backward. People looted the warehouses of grain. It rained red, but we remained corded, issued from the other. It rained 100 days, the river came to new marks. The world matched our minds, and I invented a doctor who cobbled together a man. I who copy you, Mary. And then just one more from this book. Dear Mother, we rent a house in Italy. Black currants stain our fingerprints. We write in red, mother and child. My skin remembers P's glyptic touch, the sex we had beside your grave. When I was 15, his words were earnest like a slingshot. We gospelized you. I prepare fermented fish. The tiny blade lifts the bones like threads. P is a genius of wonder and invention. Not one domestic task takes his attention, and I in the kitchen am a genius of famine. Your loving daughter, Mary Shelley. And I'm just going to ask you to kind of switch tone a little bit so that I can read kind of different mood for this book. I'm going to just read one last poem from this book. These books came out really close together, so I still feel like I'm sharing this book. This one is called My Babysitter Karen B, who was sent to Willard Asylum. There are only 2 photos of me as a child. She took them. She had no child. She had cool cigarettes and a job at the drugstore. She gave me the Crayola box with the built-in sharpener. 400 suitcases were stored in the attic of Willard Asylum for the chronic insane. She joined her twin brother there. She wore her black hair down. A child could admire it. She bought me an Easter basket, a stuffed rabbit whose fur rubbed off. She walked everywhere. She painted circles of blush on her cheeks. Loony, people said so. I mean grown-ups who saw signs, who passed her on our street before she started to call and say, remember. On the phone she said, remember. Remember the date we killed her brother, forgetting he'd been committed. I took her hand and tagged along like an animal. She was perfect to a child. In 1995, when the asylum closed, an artist took photos of the 400 suitcases. The photos were put online, the contents laid out respectfully. In the open suitcases, belts, pocket knives, Lone Ranger cards, keys, ribbons, shoe polish, mirrors, pills, a fountain pen, bottle of glycerin, a zither, kit of needles, bread ration card, the Gospel of John, a letter. Each suitcase had a name. Lena C, Lillian L, Mary T, Gloria P, Cassie M, Francis T, Marion R, Catherine S, Dimitri Z, Ruby C, Anthony C, FJ L, Viola G, Alice T, Carrie L, Karen B. Remember. Thank you for listening. This is a great space. Thank you.
No. So I live in St. Louis and I've lived there about 20 years. And St. Louis, as you probably know, was part of France at one time. And it still carries a little bit the traces of that, mostly in the names of streets and some of the architecture, but yeah, so there's some traces of the French, but it was part of New France. So I always like to think of that as I'm I mean, it's a beleaguered city, but I like to think about its French origins. New France. It takes the stranger long to learn each local mispronunciation of names left by coureurs de bois. A long way from the Tuileries and the soft crunch of gravel walks. Gravois rhymes with Illinois at the ragged edge of Nouvelle France, an avenue without renewal on which the evening sun goes down. It may take years and years to learn each inconvenient indirection through parishes of pawpaw French, the barricades and cul-de-sacs where children congregate at dusk, at ease above their handlebars. A long way from the Tuileries, where swans patrol a standing pool in calligraphic harmony, you turn on Choteau Avenue. No stranger to desuetude, you know each symptom of neglect, the fence of scribbled honey vine, or cairn of dust and gravel crushed from the city's porous bedrock, an aggregate of lost intent. Far from any pied-à-terre, the puddle left from last night's rain reflects no cream of Paris stone, but only les nuages qui passent, the passing clouds, the setting sun. In our botanical gardens in St. Louis, there's a geodesic dome that houses some of the plants called the Climatron, which I love. It's but I used to see a lot of foxes living under the corner of the Climatron. I don't think they're there anymore. The fox. A fourth grader sees the fox skulking behind the Climatron as something from the rural past. Reynard, the sly antagonist of Chanticleer and Gingerbread, ghostly tip of tail for wit, fur waistcoat immaculate. But foxery is futurist, a whiff of what's upwind, a knack for slipping past apocalypse. When all intention fails, the fox, which never had a human use, will revel in irrelevance, rolling in the uncut grass. Up until a couple of years ago, I had backyard chickens. And the last two were Sally and Daisy. And if you've only encountered chickens, if you haven't encountered them at all, or if you've encountered them in vast numbers, you might not be aware that they have very distinct personalities, I find, as much as any other animal. So Daisy was, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but Daisy was aggressive and sort of mean, but I liked her. Sally was larger and sweet-natured. So they both died in quick succession, but I ended up writing an elegy for Sally, elegy for a hen. For 10 springs, you circled the yard in step beside your sister, in league with stones of the field through all kinds of weather, basking in August heat, high-stepping through snow, or charging squirrels through wild carrot and common yarrow, white wings outstretched in raptorial threat. Feathers without flight kept the world withdrawn. Whatever came and went, no politics beyond the flock's nesting box or the shadow of a cooper's hawk across the coop and run. For 10 springs, dusk and dawn, the days linked so lightly, until a soft morning in March, the dull glint of glazed metals, chimney pots and rooftops gray, nothing between them and the gray rain clouds settling down. Your body nothing but a bundle of feathers and feather-like bones. I've got another chicken poem in this book. I was by myself in the house and went out and was doing chicken work, taking care of the chickens, and they were both in front of me. And I turned around and there was another chicken behind me, and it looked like Sally. And there are no chickens anywhere in our neighborhood otherwise, and I truly thought I was losing my mind. And we couldn't find who it kept. We kept it for a while. I kept getting out. Couldn't find who owned it, and never really did. Another April. A strange bird stood amid the flock, doppelganger of our Wyandotte, but small, perhaps a bantam of the breed. We called her April for the month she came and went with eerie ease, escaping through the cyclone fence as through a mirror, more and more remote with each egress, her inscape of silver lace, so like the wires woven links. 3 times I caught her in a landing net, first high up in a tree, then clucking through a private park where splatter from a fountain embroidered hosta leaves, and finally on the yellow line of Shenandoah Avenue, scratching at a cricket with the freedom of a jungle fowl. Monofilaments of mesh crushed her feet and feathers, her haggard eye almost aquiline in outrage. Come what might, she would have lived untrammeled, not this harried flight from run and roost. Neither tame nor wild, with each declarative denial, she tangled further in the net until I turned her loose. Morning glory grows all through our alleys, and I'm sure it does most places. Morning glory. Why call this plant a weed? Some flowers evince no difference between giving and taking, all their powers dispersed, unseen beyond a style that your wants might for a little while be mine and open to the light. Some flowers don't care where they grow, climbing and trailing across the bricks with no trellis of metaphysics or narrow bed to call their own, careless as a worm through wood. Quiebra platos, breaker of plates. Their tendrils overwhelm the slates and coping stones that have withstood sleet and snow. The ragged comb in late September hid below a crest of papyraceous foam. Tough and tissue soft, loose blossoms open for a while to sense whatever slant of daylight comes, then close to cold in a slow wince. Down the river from St. Louis is a little town called Chester, where the creator of Popeye is from. And they identify all the Popeye characters with real historical people in the community, and seem to conflate those identities, absolutely. So Popeye lived in this little river town and was in fact not a sea captain, but a riverboat captain. No one seems to come to look at their statues or their memorials, but Chester, Illinois. Cloud piles on cloud, keel scrapes sand, coal dust drifts from a rusty barge, the river full of silt, field soldered to field, even the light heavy. Far from the sea, Popeye reels along a gravel road with an oar against his shoulder. On Swanwick Street, the rare tourist en route to somewhere else ruminates on myths displaced. Roughhouse cooks an omelet as patrons trade in cattle futures. The first stirrings before a storm stroke the wings of the wiffle hen, drooping in sleep on a porch rail, as scrapings of harvest home drift down from windows of the opera house in flurries of rosin. Far from the sea, Far from its whip and precipitous glare, the floodplain streaked with rills condenses the leaden light. Travelers from vast spaces or truckers in a turnout check their instruments and test infinitives against each hole and hollow. To spend the day in a rain barrel, to scour the kitchen clean, to curl beneath an olive quilt, an ember under ash. I have a small, as was mentioned, I publish books through Flood Editions, and I don't make any money off of it, but in the past few years, I've traded books for beer to a brewery that I really recommend in Southern Illinois called Scratch Brewery. And at one point they asked me to write a poem as well. And I thought this would be a poem of advertisement for the beer, but it ended up, as so often happens, being a little more bleak than that. But the beer is really good. Beer to guard. How good it is to sip a beer outdoors with winter drawing near, above the wreckage of a meal. How good before the bill comes due to watch a copper light gleam through an ale infused with chanterelle, and trust yourself to only those sensations of the tongue and nose, what's felt and how it makes you feel. A sip held in the mouth evokes a golden bloom among the oaks and water drawn up from a well. One afternoon spent near the source of happiness, atop a horse that now stands idle in its stall. These days you keep too much inside, but once you foraged far and wide through pastures north of Carbondale. How fine that you have faintly caught a sour note of apricot, so deep in the cloudy dregs of fall. The past and what has come to pass, and cradle in your palm a glass of once, a final swig of ale. I sometimes turn back to the early troubadours. I don't know Occitan, but I try to suss it out and listen to recordings and look up the words, and I try to follow the sound of it as much as the sense. But this is from a late troubadour, Guiro Riquier, and he was called the last troubadour, and this is his last song. It's for the best that I stop singing. Songs should come from happiness. And lately I've felt less and less inspired, with my horizon shrinking. When I recall my darkest days and contemplate a world ablaze and dread extinctions of tomorrow, who could wonder at my sorrow? My fire dwindled long ago. I rake the ashes, fitting muse for crafting esoteric blues from scraps of what I feel and know. At dusk, a woodcock on the wing tumbles into early spring, and yet in verse, such things express a feeling of belatedness. These days, authorities dismiss the subtle circuitries of rhyme as relics of another time or quaint devices that persist on shelves of kitsch and curios. Why not attempt a work in prose, a memoir, to mythologize my progress through a world of lies? We live with gaps, hypocrisies, and flights of happiness brought low, estranged from what we feel and know. As every instrument agrees, we live in seasons out of sync, a February on the brink of never, snow extinguishing the first magnolia blossoming. This dread has tainted everything. Each dawn I come to consciousness and panic, prickles of distress, and clench my teeth. Why would I sing? Tohees still propose a slow, familiar tune, but no words follow. This ache of feeling finds no phrase, no means by which to mourn or praise. So I'll end with Dragons. I never know what to say about this poem or the times I've read it, because it doesn't quite give it away, but the circumstances of it were seeing the eclipse. I have friends who work in the Wild Canid Center south of St. Louis, so I went out to watch the eclipse with the wolves, who don't come into the poem, oddly, but they all, during the eclipse, gathered in a mass in the middle of a field and put their heads down as though they were going to sleep, and then got up like 5 minutes later. Like, what the fuck? So, Dragons. And keep in mind, the next eclipse is coming up. It is, I think, April. So if you're in the Midwest, you can see the totality. Dragons. We gathered in a field southwest of town, several hundred hauling coolers and folding chairs along the gravel road, dry in August. 2 ruts of soft dust that soaked into our clothes in rows and plumes behind us. By noon, we could discern their massive coils emerging from a bale of cloud, scales scattering crescent dapples through walnut fronds, the light polarized, each leaf tip in focus. As their bodies blotted out the sun, the forest faded to silver point. A current of cool air extended from the bottomlands, an intimation of October, and the bowl of sky deepened its celestial archaeology. Their tails, like banners of a vast army, swept past Orion and his retinue to sighs and scattered applause, the faint wail of a child crying. In half an hour, they had passed on in search of deep waters. Before our company dispersed, dust whirling in the wind, we planned to meet again in 7 years for the next known migration. Sunlight flashed on windshields and caught along the riverbank a cloudy, keeled scale about the size of a dinner plate, cool as blanc de Chine in the heat of the afternoon. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all so much for coming and for listening. And thank you to Grolier, and it's really a privilege to read with Jessica and Devin. They're beautiful poems, and yeah, it's pretty intimidating. But anyway, I'm going to read you mainly poems from my new book, Heartworm. So I like trying to write poems of praise or odes to very kind of like sometimes ugly or unpoetic seeming things. So I'm going to read you one of those first. This is a poem of praise to a cockroach, which seemed like a good challenge for a poem. So this one is modeled after Christopher Smart's famous 18th century poem to his cat Joffrey, which goes, "For I will consider my cat Joffrey," and then each line begins with "for." So this is, "For I will consider this cockroach Belinda. For I will consider this cockroach Belinda. For at a single day old, she could run as fast as her folks, though the size of a speck of dust. For I don't even know if she counts as an animal, which fills me with delight. For she's more believable by far than any angel, and when she dies, we'll stick her feet up in a fuck you to the heavens. For my heart quickens for her more than for spring bulbs. For even a jaded senator will shriek with Belinda in their hair. For Belinda means beautiful in Italian, but bright serpent in Old German. For she is older than the Triceratops. For you cannot lay siege to her, as she can live for weeks without food in her palace of pipes, her Versailles of drains. For she's commingled with midnight and found only ashes. For the other night, I found her in the sink like a tiny Vishnu waving her many arms. For I watched her creep up the curved side of the sink like a monk in silence. For I watched her squeeze her limbs like broom bristles into the drain's black cave. For I studied the bone white of the vacated porcelain in amazement. For beneath disgust and terror, strange joy. So I'm going to read you a couple more poems that kind of are odes to maybe unlikely things. So this next one, so I go on a lot of walks with my dog, and she's always picking up the most disgusting things she can find in the neighborhood. And multiple times she's managed to find used condoms on the ground. So yeah, this is an ode to a used condom in the park. So ode to a used condom in the park. I like to think of them fishing you out, then hooking you on. Their freezing hands fumble crinkling at your difficult package. Their horny carefulness almost makes me love them. And though I know they should have tidied you up, urging you in past the flapping door of the metal bin, that too is good, reminding me how all role models are temporary, all loves flawed and sketchy. Even my dogs, dropping you now as I bark at her, back to where, serenely on your snow pile you lie. Good omen, hex against winter. Milky light reaching down to us from a filthy star that, you know what, might not yet be dead. So I guess not all of the poems that are in praise of unlikely things are about disgusting things, or so-called disgusting things. So this one is about sort of an ode or a poem of praise about being in a long-term relationship where you're not married. And it's about a poem of praise to the term partner, which is the term people often use to describe such relationships. That term never seemed particularly romantic to me. It sort of sounded like a business partner. So this poem was an attempt to make it sound a little bit more romantic, and it's a love poem as well. Partner. Since we're not married and have been together so long, boyfriend and girlfriend is starting to sound too hip, too sexy for what we are, too Parisian, like we take long strolls in the Seine or make love in front of mimes, like we tie our bodies into balloon animals and float, or ride the train under the slimmest finger of ocean to London, imagining Sherlock Holmes hot on the trail of Moriarty for the 100th time, too stupid and obsessed to know his own love for Watson if it hit him in the face. They're partners, and I think it's time for us to steal their appellation of dusty, trusty hue that they stole from Western Marlboro men, chewing tobacco and spitting on cactuses and not pronouncing the T as they move through the canyons, muscular thighs draped over their horses. We too journey side by side on the trusty steeds of twin beds, or the single gigantic steed of a California king. So my nighttime imitations of a ninja won't bother you. So your thin form can be rolled up like a cigarette in blankets and be smoked by night, and the long plume of your dreams can stay private. I love how it's all taken on faith, the way day is partner to night or yesterday to today, knowing no covenant keeps it all together. No words stored in a courthouse or promises made before people who think love is sealed by their getting drunk for free, or by throwing rice on us to plant in us a field we work all our lives. I want you no sidekick or wife, but choosing to be with me and me with you day by day, stealthy, capable human partners, planting flags in a private happiness, without tiny Sherpas of us climbing to the top of a cake, without the cake being sliced into and floated out amidst a flock of endless friends and relations, each jostling for the piece with extra sugar, with the frosting in which is written congratulations and our names. Okay, so maybe I'm going to do one last one of these poems that's sort of a ode to an unlikely subject, or a poem of praise to such a subject. So this one is about Jeff Goldblum, the actor, and it comes from watching a bunch of YouTube videos of him and feeling very jealous of him, of how sort of witty and charming he seemed, and sort of knowing I would never be that way. So this poem is just called "I Want to Be Jeff Goldblum." I want to be Jeff Goldblum. I want to sweet talk everyone I meet. I want to have a silver tongue. I want each time I sit down to write a poem to think, this is going to be a Jeff Goldblum poem. I want to murmur and stutter like butter, like velvet. I want to be the nice Jewish boy that I already am, but raised to an art form. I want to wear dark glasses and leopard print suits, be so affected, even I can't tell if I'm full of shit, as I dodder on, exposing an inner vacuousness that, admit it, we all have, but that I, Jeff Goldblum, in my best moments rise above. I want you to sneer at me, then laugh and feel good in spite of yourself. I want my former co-star Glenn Close to call me charm personified. Let me wake in the middle of the night feeling a pulsing, throbbing desert of bare worry in my chest and say to myself, it's okay, honey, you're Jeff Goldblum, and be 100% correct. Let me be injured and carried on the back of a pickup truck as it floors it away from a tyrannosaur. I want objects in the mirror to be closer than they appear, and I want to be that mirror. I want to save the world from aliens with Will Smith. I want to be a smarmy sea captain whose white whale is Bill Murray. I want to slowly morph into a fly, growing hundreds of compound eyes and becoming more and more grotesque, less and less lovable, until my lover puts me out of my misery, but then wake up from it all like a bad dream and then win Best Actor at the 1986 Saturn Awards. But I fear I'll never be Jeff Goldblum. I fear I'm no more Jeff Goldblum than I was 10 years ago, that I've made zero progress Goldblum-wise. Though I've watched all 70 Jeff Goldblum films, I have not grown an inch taller or more charming. That is a tyranny of fandom, of being a fan, which is to wave cool air over a being who disregards you, who lolls about eating grapes in Egypt and can't really help you except to enjoy them better. And I know if I live a million years, I will never, ever be Jeff Goldblum, that there's only a terrifying stretch of meanness waiting for me day upon day until I wear out. Okay, so that one, it's in praise of Jeff Goldblum, but it sort of morphs into a poem of complaint. And I think I'm going to read you some other poems of kind of complaint or anger at this point. I think, as much as praise and odes appeal to me, also I think there's a lot of poetry and enjoyment in sort of complaining about things in poems. And maybe I do it enough in my regular life, at least in poems, maybe I can try to be a little less tedious than I am with my normal kvetching. So I'm going to read you, I guess the next one I'm going to read you is about Facebook and sort of about social media in general, which I really dislike. So yeah, it's just called Facebook. I hate the voice Facebook makes me adopt. Cheery, thoughtful, pleased, and false as an actor's cutout, gracing a cheap marquee. Who'd think everyone being together so easily for such a chummy picnic of the mind could be so dull? To which we hitched our gaze's endless need for something marvelous and cheap, and above all, easy. But beneath that nice veneer, oh man, the envy, the need for love that marketing experts milk, making us cash cows. I'd like to think it's not so false as all that, but like gleaming teeth, which though popped out are useful, practical, and keep the elderly alive. But it's the casual debasement that I can't abide. How it seems like a glass slipper, sparkling, the perfect fit. So one gnarls the foot and hacks at it. Yeah, so that last image is from the Grimm's version of the Cinderella story where the evil stepsisters chop off their toes and heels to get them into the glass slipper. And for some reason, that was seeming to me like what we're doing when we're online in terms of harming ourselves in pursuit of something that maybe is not as fun as advertised. Okay, so I'm going to read you another poem of complaint, I guess, or maybe more than that in this case. So I know we're all sick of Trump poems probably at this point, but I thought in honor of his fourth indictment, I would read one. And yeah, this poem is also kind of about how we can't seem to get rid of him anyway, and he just keeps popping back up endlessly. So this is called 45. Even those who hate to say his name love to say it, like a kind of curse, a blame button for every wronged rocket thought or wish. Like how Satan must love to say the name of God, must enjoy the mint of it dissolving on his tongue. His name a panic button, a Rumpelstiltskin in reverse, as if it's a kind of repellent to keep him off. But look, certain poems and playing cards are already infected, little black holes pool, and here his big clown face comes again, headbutting through the page, or springing up at the next table, clickety-clack, like a nightmare jack-in-the-box. Preening, his itchy, sarcastic voice spreading, like orange clown wings from inescapable airport TVs. As he cuts funds for the arts and schools, schleps away all our words in a bloated grab bag, like a reverse Santa Claus, only his name is left, mumbled in sad Morse tones through the walls and auto lots, bars and labs, as if there might be some secret to how it works, some green cord to cut to defuse the bomb that's already gone off. Okay, so I think I'm just going to end with a poem that's sort of a mix of those two modes of praise and complaint, since they're often kind of hard to extricate from each other. And this poem is maybe like an ode and sort of an anti-ode at once. So it's about Florida. It's called Dear Florida. It's modeled after Allen Ginsberg's poem To America. And it was written pre-DeSantis' sort of rise to power, but I think still captures a lot of my feelings about the state. It also has a anaphora in it, like a lot of my poems, a lot of repetition of first words. And I think just some small things, just references. Ponce de Leon is the conquistador who led the first European expedition into Florida. X Gonzalez is the Parkland survivor and gun control activist, and Elsa and Anna are the Disney princesses from Frozen. I was imagining the actresses who play them at Disney World, kind of going home after a long day. So I'm just going to read this one. I'll end with this. Thank you so much for listening. This is Dear Florida after Allen Ginsberg. Florida, you have the most stowed guns of any state. You are besting even Texas, Florida. Florida, heaven and hell are supposed to be separate locations. Florida, stop praying. I'm trying to talk to you. Your purple skies improvise brilliantly over the Hobby Lobby. I don't think you even try to distinguish between sex and death. Florida, you are poor white. Florida, you are Cuban, Jewish, ancient, spring break. Florida, God was drinking mezcal when he designed your birds. If I'm being honest, I prefer gentle Hawaii to you. I imagine Anna and Elsa after a long day, driving home separately, chain smoking, staring out the window. Florida, it's nuts that we let you decide our elections. Florida, Jacksonville is your trashiest city. Florida, you must believe in the beauty of Miami. You are the perfect location for Walt Disney's crypt. Your magic castle is the stepchild of the conquistador's rancid dream. I stand below your 100-foot ad for farm fresh biscuits, feeling holy and ashamed. Florida, you call Hooters a family restaurant. Your glamour and violence, Florida, your red and blue, your two coasts. Florida, you are pincushion with metal crosses. Florida, your gas stations have been stabbed to death with flags. Florida, all your wintry Christmas decor is sarcastic and makes me happy even though I'm Jewish. Florida, Bikini Sports Bar is what it sounds like. The waitresses wear bikinis. I watched an undercover boss show once where the boss pretended to be an employee and offered the women their breast implants, but not health insurance. It was bad, Florida, even by your standards. Florida, how can I relax in your prehistoric mood? Florida, X Gonzalez's shaved head is an egg of beauty. Your birdline bridges are lovely, I can't tell you enough. But Trump and Bush, really, Florida? Florida, I know you wanted Al Gore. Florida, I had no faith you'd go for Hillary. Your masculinity is a problem, Florida. We need to talk about it. Florida, I'm not sure all your Cubans and ancient New Yorkers can save you. How long will you kiss Ponce de Leon's golden ass? When will you be worthy of your millions of armadillos? Florida, is your heart a concealed carry? Florida, they tell me you'll be underwater soon. Imagine a clear sea instead of you, the Disney spires shooting up. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. Let's give the poets another round of applause. We have some books for sale. The poets will be signing books. Thank you so much for coming. Our next reading is next Thursday. It's the 3rd annual Fannie Mae Katie Memorial reading. It's taking place offsite down the street on Barrow Street. We'd love for you all to join us. If everyone could please put your chairs up against one of the walls, I'd be grateful. Thanks again for coming.
Oh, no. Okay. Oh,